Hey guys, welcome back.
We're really glad that you're back for part
And
two
if
of,
you have, yeah, we're at part
yeah,
two. If you haven't listened to part one, bing,
click on that thing.
click on
Or I'm
that.
sorry, that thing. It's going to be on that side.
That's going to
It's
be on that side.
magic.
That's good side. Got it. You can hear us talk about the first episode of the Delphi Juror interview. So
Mhm.
now you're on episode two with us about the episode two Delphi Juror interview.
So
Ready?
hard to spit out. So
It
many
really
consonants and
is.
vowels in the wrong places. It's weird. Anyway,
Yes.
welcome back to the madness. My dogs are barking. Just pretend like they're saying hello to you.
I can't hear them.
Oh, good. I can.
Hello, dogs. Me. All right. So going back into episode two, so they pick up where Brian Harshman, one of the troopers, gets on the stand, and there was an issue with his professionalism, Kimberly.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of stuff, apparently, according to this juror, that he said that they just didn't believe. So they threw
Mm-hmm.
it all out.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he said.
They also didn't love the bullet.
Yeah.
I
The
didn't
bullet
love it
science.
either. I think anyone that's ever held or owned a gun cringed and died a little on the inside, thinking that this gun would cycle a bullet through and you'd somehow be able to match it to that gun because this particular weapon, that's just not how it works. Um,
Mm-mm.
in any case, they thought that was sort of junk
Yeah.
science. She didn't say that, but she's like, it was not a reliable, that it seemed pretty much, it gave her the ick.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a part of their deliberate. They did not consider the bullet, which was one of the only things that they tried to say linked to Richard Allen. But so the exclusion of that really gets me nervous and a little panicky about how they reached a guilty verdict, because that's one of the key pieces of evidence that they had against him. Now they're not even considering it. They also think that, what's Harshman? How appropriate.
Yeah.
That he was kind of full of it. So nope, not him either.
Right.
They also did not consider the muddy, bloody Sarah is what I'm calling her, because I can't remember her last name, but she was an eyewitness that got real worked up on the stand because she was all over the place. First, she saw Richard Allen covered in mud on the side of the road. Then it was covered in blood. Then it was mud and blood. Then it could have been mud, but a little bit of blood. Like, second verse, same as the first. This girl she couldn't tell you what day it was. And she was very
Oh,
frustrated at being picked at. Like, well, sweetie,
yeah.
you're very inconsistent here. And that's kind of a problem. I'm sure the prosecutors went home that night like, oh my God. But then again, your
Oh,
job was to make sure she was ready to go and that all of your witnesses had consistent testimony.
but it goes back to what you were talking about in episode one of like these eyewitnesses not identifying Richard Allen as that's the guy that I saw. They
Right.
don't know. They
And
don't know.
it's like you've got this one eyewitness who's off the rails, but she
Oh,
was clearly memorable. She's also one
yeah.
of the only witnesses that was like, yeah, I saw the guy. Everyone else was like, well, I saw a guy, or I don't know. Like, she was the one that was adamant, like, I saw him. And then
Yeah.
she didn't know which west or east he was walking, how close to the car when she passed him on the road. She didn't know up from down.
I
And
wouldn't have
she was a
believed
terrible
a thing.
witness.
Yeah.
And that just adds to my frustration, because even discounting her, you are now discounting eyewitnesses,
Yeah.
discounting physical evidence, discounting some of the law enforcement testimony. How in the absolute fiery pits of hell did you get a guilty verdict then?
After she kind of talks about that, she spends a lot of the podcast talking about the deliberation process, right?
I respect the process. At
We
least as she
respect the
described
process.
it, seemed very thorough, attentive to detail, considerate, taking their time. Like, I appreciated that she gave us that insight, and she was very articulate about it, and I really liked that.
Well, what I took from all of what she had said was
Mhm.
they all are hanging their hat on a guilty verdict because of this timeline.
And
And
the
that is
van that, again, witnesses could not actually
in the
clarify
vein.
was
Yeah.
or wasn't present at a certain time because dude was checking out,
I don't remember.
whatever. He was
It's
doing his side hustle somewhere, or
yeah, yeah.
maybe he wasn't, or maybe he was. In all these cajillion confessions, only one time does Richard Allen say anything different than he things he. Now remember, confession doesn't mean squat innocent people every day make confessions, coercion, exhaustion, panic. It was just, I did it. I did it. Okay, that's great. That doesn't give us anything. The one time he gave a piece of information that no one else but the killer would know was because a van drove by and startled him. Like, it was still one of those pieces of evidence that was like, well,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, and she also said that a part of her issue too was they didn't say who else it could have been.
And that's the one of the biggest problems I have, because the judge wouldn't
Oh,
let them enter a third party into the scenario. They didn't invite that third party to the chat. And had they, that's why I think this verdict would at least have been hung.
oh, I would have dug my heels
I
into
would have
this.
hung that jury if I was on it.
Like, y'all can eat it and they can eat it because he ain't going.
I have some questions. I hope more jurors give interviews.
Yes,
You're
yeah.
never going to see this. But if you do,
You never
we
know.
are warm fuzzy. We will always welcome everybody here, and we would
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
love to talk to you. We
Right.
have zero, there's no, you're
It's
perfectly
not
fine.
about you,
It's
girl.
not about you, sweetheart.
And
It's just
yeah,
not. It just, unfortunately, you were the first to jump into the arena. So we have
yeah.
nothing else to talk about except the information you gave us. So mea culpa
But
there. But
good for you for hopping out and
yeah, I appreciate that.
yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
what bugs the absolute hell out of me is that they started at 9-3, 9 guilty, 3 not even not guilty, undecided. And the
Mhm.
next day it was 8-4. So, like, clearly, and she was one of them originally that was
Yeah.
undecided. But my concern is the way she described how they closed the gap. That the foreman, who clearly was on the guilty side at this point, said, okay, well, you undecided people, you go home tonight and you make a list of all the things that you think are absolutely like, yep, this checks. And then the things that don't make a lot of sense to you or that you don't think, I don't know how she phrased it, but it was basically like the pro and con kind of thing to whittle down to guilt. It felt like that was a tactic
Yeah.
to get to a unanimous verdict. Obviously, the majority was already there. I'm not saying
Right.
that's what happened. I wasn't there, but I can see that being a really good cajoling point. Make
Well,
a list of what you know is true or what you know, like,
yeah.
and then the things that you maybe don't. Literally, you just told these 3 to 4 people, depending on the day, to go home and list out their reasonable doubt
I
and
know.
then do away with the things that they didn't like or that didn't make sense and just
Yeah.
keep the thing. That's what it sounds like happened here.
I
They're allowed to accept evidence piecemeal as they want, but the
yeah.
majority sent these folks home and said, make your, and then took the opportunity when they came back, probably to tackle those lists. That's what happened.
100%. 100%. I think that's what happened. And
Gosh.
I just no disrespect. I just and she said, I cried when I said he's guilty. Like I felt
Excuse me.
terrible. I felt
Yeah.
this and that. And I know like there's going to be a part of you, especially in this situation. And
You're
maybe
sentencing
I'm
another
totally
human.
wrong on this,
Yeah.
but it's going to be, you're going to feel for the victims, the families. This never should have happened. But I can go to bed at night and I'm okay with sending that, to prison for the rest of his
Right.
life. I'm
And even if
fine.
you feel that way, I can see the sad irony in feeling bad about the decision they're going to make because it's a really heavy thing to weigh on you that you are deciding someone else's fate.
Yeah,
That's heavy. Even
it
if you're
is.
certain he's guilty, I can understand that being really overwhelming and heavy. I can.
Yeah, yeah.
It just sounded like there was a hint of not buyer's remorse, but it came off with a hint of, well, I was nervous because I felt bad. Well, if you felt bad, there had to be a reason because she didn't say it was overwhelming or this was a big decision. She said she felt bad. It's an interesting choice of words. Why would you feel bad
It-
for him if he did this
yeah,
heinous thing?
exactly. Feel bad for who?
Right. There's a
For
difference
what?
between feeling that negative power that you've got in your hands and the weight of it. That's one thing. But she said she felt bad for him. Why?
I don't know. And she said that she feels good about her verdict. To
And
this day, she stands by
she
it. She said
should.
there's some YouTubers and some attorneys that have channels that got it all wrong, and I'm like,
How could they
um,
not? Because they weren't there because no one was allowed.
and she opened the floodgates of Reddit, which that can be a great
Yeah.
place or a dangerous
You're
place.
like, don't start WebMDing your symptoms. That's the same
I
thing.
know.
I have the hiccups
But,
now.
what troubles me is there's a lot, but to narrow it down, I think that through the appellate process, he's gonna have issues
Yeah.
just
The
'cause.
Supreme Court of Indiana is responsible. Well, granted, maybe not, because this judge wanted these attorneys off this case on the defense, and the Supreme Court is the one that said, nope, they can stay. So,
Yeah,
there might dole out a little equity that we didn't see here,
maybe.
but appeals are always difficult. But if we're
Appeal
seeing people like Murdoch and others, like
Yeah,
maybe, but
maybe.
they've got
Oh,
Andrea
Andrea?
Burkhart.
Yeah.
Isn't she putting her hat
I
in?
I think she's thrown her hat in to help. If I were Richard Allen, I don't even know if this is possible. I would want my case tried freaking out of state.
Right? I don't even know. I'm going to Google it right now if that's even possible. I don't think
I
it
don't
is.
even know if that's possible,
I
but I'd
don't
be
think
like,
it
I want to
is.
get as far from this place as possible to be oh,
Hey, he's throwing some moves in.
I know. He wants to be on the podcast.
I'll
I
get
would
mine and we can all just, we can sing the songs of our people.
I know. But I would want to be as far away from Indiana as possible. Full stop.
They don't stand a chance if Andrea's. I absolutely adore her. I think she's just as
Andrea's genius.
flatline to the point as you can. I appreciate her stoicism.
Yeah.
I
No,
do.
she's business, which is
Yeah.
great.
But you know that when Lawyer Lee is on the internet trying not to cry talking about this, the depth of the injustice felt uniformly is not just us ranting on the internet. A lot of people,
Yeah,
legal professionals included, feel like this is just
a huge injustice.
off the rails.
Well, and one of the other things that I was going to say that bothered me is one of the girls they were both beautiful and darling
Yeah,
teenagers, young teens, but
they're precious.
as any young teen knows, looks how you are,
Yeah,
what you look like is a big deal.
yeah.
And one of them was a little self-conscious about her weight,
Hmm.
and she was found unclothed, and they had taken pictures of her body and showed the jurors, and her
Right,
grandmother was like, she would have been mortified,
right.
100% mortified, and that is
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
it is. And unfortunately, it's kind of unavoidable because it's
It
the crime
is.
scene. I can see why people were put off by they either blurred or censored Richard Allen in one of the videos from the prison where he was not clothed.
He's naked, yeah.
Then again, I'm not playing devil's advocate for Richard Allen. He's in the courtroom sitting right there. Like the it was a weird moment of decency that I didn't expect, that they would like blur or censor like his dignity, so to speak. But also at the same time, we were doing no such thing, but we were looking at pictures of a crime scene. It's kind of
It's
unavoidable, but like
yeah, no,
I get that. That's heartbreaking.
it is. It's really
It,
heartbreaking, and I know, Lee said that she just had a hard time getting past that comment, and I do
yeah,
too. It's really sad.
yeah,
It's like I said, these things, they should have never happened.
yeah.
They are
I
totally
think
avoidable.
it's a short segue, and then I'm gonna get back on track. I think what really I'm gonna get choked up thinking about it now, especially thinking about Lawyer Lee, thinking about it because this is where I watched it. When at some point they said that there had been a mix of water like around the eyes, and that it was in a downward, and they concluded that the mix of perceived like water or fluid in the blood was because she'd been crying.
Oh gosh.
Oh God. I,
Yeah.
I can't, and this is how I'm going to ground myself and bring myself back. I can't even picture just that one bit of information that there were clean streaks on one of the victims' faces because it was clear that she had cried. And then look at this evidence and go, in my head, I want to catch the mother effer that this is
Oh, 100%.
this person deserves what they get because this is disgusting. And then feel bad about sentencing him later. Like it just I just don't I can't make this make sense.
Well, just because you have someone to fill the slot
Doesn't mean it's the right person.
it doesn't mean that it's the right person.
And
And
he could be the right person, but they didn't bring enough of a case.
I think the things that they struggled with to not initially all get to that guilty verdict are the things that the judge didn't allow in.
Well, yeah.
Like, if
And
not him, who else?
more than any other case that I've seen recently, if you take one piece of this prosecution's case out, then none of it makes sense. It's like a house of cards.
Yeah.
That's how sort of flimsy it was. It rested on unreliable, conflicting, sometimes downright nonsensical witness testimony, a wonky bullet science, so many confessions that were problematic and made no sense. It ended up being a video of Bridge Guy and a van that a witness couldn't actually put in the right place at the right time for sure, and there's evidence of that. But the conclusion that this juror said they came to that really put them over the edge for guilty was that Richard Allen said, I was there at this time. I was wearing this clothing. It matched Bridge Guy. And since they determined, well, he is Bridge Guy and Bridge Guy is the guy that did this, it must be him. That was it.
Yeah.
But they discredited and disregarded several pieces of evidence that made that more or less plausible, so to speak. This prosecution needed everything that they brought to stick and make sense to win, but that they apparently didn't even need that.
Well, it's one
And
of those,
that's a problem for me because
it's
they
a
clearly
problem.
didn't understand reasonable doubt or accept that the information wasn't absolute, but they determined it to be.
Well, it's like when you rip a piece of paper and kind of like throw it in the air, like,
Yeah.
and then you try to put it back together and not all the pieces fit
Yeah.
just right.
Yeah.
And I, there's holes in it though, and it's not
Yeah.
just a complete sheet. But I feel like they got pieces and bits and pieces and went like, is this enough to charge somebody with this murder that everybody wants solved? And I
Yeah.
get it. This was a terrible crime, but find the right person. And I feel
Mhm.
like if you go through and look at what has happened throughout this case, and
Yeah.
when I say that, I mean from when it happened to when Richard Allen started his um trial,
Yeah.
there has been so much backwoods shenanigans that has tainted so much that people
Mhm.
have hid from, law enforcement. People have died. People have just, it is the craziest situation. He didn't stand a chance. He didn't
No.
stand a chance.
And I think my last big thought for once, and then I'll have it's new for you guys, right? Me, be quiet. I think the overarching issue for me is this jury basically said, well, if it barks like a dog and looks like a dog, it's a dog, question mark. The if word, the ifs in that idiom literally refer to no matter what, it is a dog. The
Yeah,
mentality here was that no matter what, we're going to make the evidence fit instead of approaching it as what doesn't fit. That's
yeah,
what bothered me about her statements is that they were looking for the fit
yeah,
instead of the perspective of, okay, well, let's look at the stuff that doesn't fit. Why doesn't it fit? Instead of parsing it out and moving on, they deliberated as if they were looking to just draw logical conclusions that it must be this person because they were the only option presented, then it
yeah.
must be him. But that is not the same thing as reasonable doubt. There's no
No,
possible way. That would have to mean that there was no possible way based on any reason, logic, because we have all of this evidence that makes sense, it clicks. There is absolutely no way it was anybody else. That's what that means. But that's
yeah.
not what happened here in her own words. They just drew conclusions.
Yeah, they drew
Ah,
conclusions. They filled in the blanks on their own, which you're
and
not supposed
that's
to do. You're not supposed to do
right.
that. That's
Right.
reasonable doubt. And
And I don't fault them for that either because I feel like so many
no,
juries get sort of fogged. I mean, Karen Reed is a great example of juries that are missing one piece of instruction or context to go, oh, we should have written this down on this jury form.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like it's both their responsibility and not their responsibility. If they don't know that they don't know what reasonable doubt is, well, who knows? That's a very big riddle. But
yeah.
That's my piece. Continue.
Well, if you guys go, I mean, there's a lot of other podcasts that kind of talk about what was happening behind the scenes,
Yeah.
in betweens, and there's a lot of drama behind it. I just think that we wanted to stick to kind of
Yeah.
the jury interview or the juror interview. I don't, it is what it is at this point. I just hate that he's having to go through this. I don't even
Yeah.
want to think about how he's being treated in prison right
He
now.
went right back to where they had him too, didn't he?
I don't know. I feel like he got transferred to somewhere after the
I
sentencing.
hope so, because that place sounds like a hellhole. Even this
I
juror
can't
was
see
like, that place
her.
is a hellhole.
Yeah. Well, and she's like, "I was seeing the video. It didn't look that bad." And I'm like,
I have a
"Oops."
lot of questions still for jurors from this trial
Yeah,
that she
like,
didn't answer. So hopefully they will be answered. And if they're
yeah,
not, maybe Lindsay, my stubbornness that we talked about before, my persistence, the whole thing with the dog and the bone, maybe I'll just go seek someone out.
yeah, maybe we'll find someone. Because my questions are like, okay, so you see a video and he's black and blue coming out of his cell. What did, if anything, did you
Yeah, like,
think, like, why is he black and blue?
yeah. I have questions. Like, she said that she'd done research since the case ended, now that they're allowed to Google and stuff. She did say that she had some restraint, but she did go on Reddit. I want to know if any of these jurors, knowing what they could possibly know now,
Yeah.
would feel like they made the right decision still. I'm very just genuinely curious about that. Not to argue with it or tell them they're wrong. I just want to know.
But
I
would they
need
say,
more. I need more to help me understand how this happened. Because I respect a jury decision. I respect the OJ decision, even though that one was like, okay. I respect the Casey Anthony jurors. Most of them have come out and said they can't sleep at night. But I
"Oh, yeah,
understand how they got to that decision. That was one they got right, unfortunately for us, because she was damn guilty. But
I
they
know."
didn't have those last few dots to connect her to literally having done. I get that though. That was a well informed jury. They hated themselves for it too. They came out like, we don't know how we're sleeping at night. We all knew she was guilty, but they didn't get far enough to prove it. They didn't push us over the goal
Right.
line. I want more from this jury so I can understand it
Yeah, sorry, I
and
had to
make
take
peace
a
with it.
pissing break.
It's okay.
Um,
I was running my yapper. I was
yeah,
yakking too much. Too many yaks today.
1 yak or 2?
Apologies.
Oh, geez, bad aspirin. Uh, no, I get what you're saying, and I think the point of some of the attorneys for Richard Allen was like, juries get it wrong sometimes. They
Yeah.
just do, and that's a part, I mean, it happens, unfortunately, and this is one of those cases.
Yeah.
And just like the defense team said, like, we are not upset at this jury because they used what they
They
had,
did their
and
job.
they did their job. That's, and we don't agree, but we have to respect it.
Yeah.
But juries can get it wrong.
Yeah.
I
I don't
just,
think it's wrong because he's an innocent man. I still don't know. I have no clue about Richard Allen. I just know that they did not convince me that he was the guy. And nothing I've heard about this trial can convince me he is the guy.
yeah,
And so I disagree wholeheartedly with this decision, but I respect the
yeah.
jury.
Well, a lot of the internet has said like the reason why a lot of people have issues with this case, it may not be the reason, but a lot of it is like people have doubts because there's no transparency. Even
Right.
the media that came in, they couldn't have electronics. They had
Right.
to have paper and pen. There's no
Yeah.
phones, no nothing. Like
And again,
they were
the fish
taking,
rots from the head. It starts with this law enforcement investigation, trickles into this judge. Like,
yeah,
the lack of transparency and equity here was 80% of my problem, because then that spoon fed all of the little issues we talked about.
yeah, I know.
I hope he wins his appeals so we can see a really, truly fair trial for him.
And if it's a
If he's
fair trial,
guilty,
and if he's guilty,
bye.
he's guilty.
Right.
But I can't say that he is.
Right.
I think because he
Mm.
was accused, he was going to lose, as they said in Making a Murderer, you know?
Oh, nice. Nice.
I like
I
that.
forgot that quote, but I like that quote.
Lose.
Well,
Yeah.
if anyone wants a sidebar random 10-minute rant from me at another point in time, I do have a feel good for you about a case that was terribly just like this one, horrific outcome that made no sense. It was no justice, and it got overturned, and that person is now walking free. And it is such good news. Like, that was such a travesty. And I heard as in I Googled to see if I missed any updates, and I did. She's out, and the world is like overjoyed because it was the most backwards ass thing I've ever seen.
Oh,
So
I think I know
maybe
which
maybe I'll
one.
ramble about that for 10 minutes another time, but there is hope in the world that things can work. The justice system can work.
Well, if you guys want to go hear that podcast for yourself, can we link it below, Kimberly?
I will link it, or at the very least give you all the information, because it is on Apple Podcasts. I don't know if they're on any other platforms. It's called The Murder Sheet, though, so a lot of you may
Yeah.
listen already. If not, I will put their details in the description.
Yes. And thank you for joining us. We're glad
Yes.
that you came. If you don't mind, do all the YouTube things. If you feel so inclined to like, subscribe, and share, we would love to have you back. Kimberly,
Yes.
do you want to see our friends out?
I never want to see you out, but I will see you out because it's late. It's late. Please make good choices. Please tell us how you feel about this case, and we will see you next time.
Start over. We're so stupid.
So extra.
We have no business being on the internet.